Coming up next on this special edition of Arizona Horizon, celebrating America's 250th anniversary. A Valley eye doctor keeps an eye on history with a rare collection of centuries-old newspapers. Also tonight, a historian of indigenous people in the U.S.-Mexico borderlands considers the founding fathers of Arizona. And a mobile museum recently traveled the state in celebration of America's milestone anniversary. Those stories and more on this special edition of Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. We celebrate America's 250th birthday, and we start with a Valley eye doctor who's keeping an eye on history with some rare first drafts of newspapers that date back centuries. The collection includes a number of news accounts involving Revolutionary War events, as well as a copy of the Declaration of Independence that's older than what's on display at the National Archives. We spoke with Dr. Frank Caserta in celebration of America 250. Good to see you, Doctor.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks for having me.
Yes, this is fantastic stuff. You collect historical newspapers.
I do.
What in the world got you started in this?
15 years ago, I was trying to find a gift for my dad, and he's always watching the news, reading the news, and I happened to just come across an original 1865 New York Times reporting the assassination of President Lincoln, who was still alive at the time the newspaper was printed. We found that fascinating, and it just set me on the path of collecting over the next 15 years.
How does one collect these things? Is there a market for them? How does it
work?
Oh,
yes, there definitely is. So there are dealers online who sell these. You can get them on eBay. There are many auction houses, like Christie's and Sotheby's and Bonhams, etc. People have estate sales and sell these things. I even had patients who come to my office and give them to me because they know I have an interest in collecting. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
Hey, I want to get to some of the visuals here and take a look at some of these because we got four that are fascinating. The first one is the Battle of Lexington and Concord. I mean, this is from like two different vantage points, correct?
Absolutely. So the American Revolution began on April 19th, 1775 with the Battle of Lexington and Concord. But how exactly did it start? And who fired the first shot? Even today, historians are not sure about this, but before the smoke had even cleared, both the patriots who favored independence and those who were loyal to King George III raced to get their version of events out first, each accusing the other side of starting the hostilities, and each trying to win the public support to their point of view. So the May 13th Pennsylvania Ledger on the left here contains 21 signed affidavits in which eyewitnesses to the battle swore that the British fired the first shots without any provocation on the part of the colonists. And of course, General Gage, Thomas Gage, the British commander-in-chief, he claimed that, of course, it was the colonists who fought first. The second newspaper on the right, the June 7, 1775 Connecticut Journal, is quite rare in being one of the few newspapers that finally printed Gage's version of events. But unfortunately for the British, it came out significantly later than the earlier reports that already inflamed the population against the British.
And the earlier reports, I think they had a quote from a redcoat: "Throw down your arms, you villains, you rebels." I mean, that's a quote.
Absolutely. Yes, you get a lot of quotes.
I'll bet
in
you
these
that
newspapers.
is fantastic. All right, I want to get to the next one, and this is Washington crossing the Delaware from the Continental Journal and Weekly Advertiser.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorites. This particular newspaper is the only one I have ever found or even heard of in 15 years of collecting that prints Washington's own account of crossing the Delaware to attack the Hessians. In fact, he describes it in great detail in a letter that he wrote the very next day, in which he explains that he hoped to get the crossing completed by midnight with all his men and the cannons, and then march the 9 miles in the freezing, darkness to Trenton and surprise the Hessians with an attack at 5 o'clock. But nothing in war ever goes as planned, right? And he tells us on the front page that, in fact, there was so much ice in the river that they fell 4 hours behind schedule, nearly costing him the element of surprise and the victory that proved to be the turning point in the war.
And it's all right there in newsprint.
It is.
That is fantastic. Okay, let's keep it moving. Battle of Yorktown, 1781, and that looks like a banner headline. Did we see many of those back in those days?
No. In fact, Hardly ever, and this may even be the first.
Wow.
So following that event, 1 week later, the first 3 newspapers to ever print that news, to break that news, were 3 newspapers in Philadelphia who all came out on the same day. The October 24th, 1784 Freeman's Journal is the most dramatic of those, and it may actually be the first banner headline in American history.
Isn't that interesting? And I love right under the head spot there, open to all parties, but influenced by none.
Yes. Now, banner headlines, as we know them, didn't actually start until about the 1890s when Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, who owned competing New York newspapers, began using them and other aspects of yellow journalism to attract readers and outsell each other.
Now, the Freeman's Journal here, real quickly, was this a newspaper? Was it a news pamphlet? I mean, a lot of
No, it absolutely is a newspaper with 4 pages. And, you know, back then, the newspapers were a lot smaller. Paper was a very scarce and expensive commodity, so it took a monumental event like this to inspire and justify the use of that much space on the front page.
Wow. Speaking of monumental events, and I mentioned this in the introduction, you got a Declaration of Independence that's older than what you see in Washington at the archives.
I actually have 5 copies of the
Holy
Declaration, but this is the oldest one. And so on the night of July 4th, the Continental Congress asked their official printer, John Dunlap, to print 200 broadside copies of the Declaration. 26 of those still exist, 25 are in institutions, only 1 is in private hands. But just 72 hours later, he printed it on the front page of his newspaper, and on page 3 is a call to the first public reading ever of the Declaration, which was to be held that day at Independence Hall, then called the State House, under the Liberty Bell.
And this was hand-delivered to this printer by Jefferson and Adams, correct?
You know, I've tried to pin down exactly who it was, and there's a little bit of question about that.
A little bit of wiggle
room. It might have
room.
been Jefferson, it might have been Adams. I'm not entirely sure as to who did it.
But he was the official printer of the Continental Congress.
John Dunlap was the printer.
Yeah.
And yes, he was their printer.
You know, this I could see where this collecting would be really something. But do you have a white whale? Is there something that you really, really want that you haven't got yet?
That I haven't. I could probably list quite a few. One would be, for example, the September 1787 first printing of the U.S. Constitution, also in the Pennsylvania Packet, the same newspaper.
Yes.
That one I haven't been able to find, but I do have others with the Constitution on the front page a few days later.
You've got the Titanic, Pearl Harbor, Germany surrendering in 1945,
the
all
Civil
sorts.
War,
Yes.
every event in American history that you can think of,
Well,
I probably have something.
Surprised you have time to work on eyes, doctor.
I
Including mine, because you are my eye doctor. I just want to make sure everyone knows that.
and I'm proud
clear
to be
that
that.
up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming in. This is absolutely fascinating. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ted.
You bet.
The O'odham were mostly farmers. We don't have like a war society. We had to transition into having a war society because of the enemies that were attacking us. That's a new thing that came to us with the Americans. So this is a traditional war club that's made out of ironwood. If you know ironwood, it's very strong wood. This is one of the old weapons, and this was used by the bravest warriors because it's hand-to-hand. It's close combat with the shield and a war club. And so there's a whole ceremony behind warfare to take care of yourself. And that's one of the things that was lacking during the American time, is we lost that ceremony to take care of men that came back from war. So we have a lot of men, even in the modern wars, where we're trying to regain a ceremony to take care of them, you know, clean them from what they've done and have them be good in the community again.
As Americans celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, some in Arizona are questioning just who the true founding fathers are in this state and how those founding fathers should be recognized. We learn more from Maurice Crandall, an associate professor of history at ASU and a citizen of the Yavapai Apache Nation of Camp Verde. When I say the phrase, founding fathers, what does that mean to you?
So a few weeks ago, I was in Philadelphia for a history conference, and that kind of question is easy. You just look around and historic buildings everywhere, especially the old part of town, Benjamin Franklin's grave, I've ever walked by it. But in a place like Arizona, we're thinking about 250 years since the founding, what founding fathers means, and the sort of maybe the joke answer would be nothing in Arizona. But the reality is those were important times here in Arizona as well, even if it was not part of the United States. And so we have to sort of turn our gaze back to when a different colonial power was nominally in charge in Arizona, and that was Spain.
Yes.
And maybe think about Spanish individuals associated with the Spanish military and government and the Catholic Church. And then on the other side, indigenous founding fathers. And so when we kind of expand our gaze a little bit, we come up with a different idea of who the founders of Arizona might be.
Who was here, as far as indigenous people? Who was here? How many folks were there? Was it stable? Was it migration path? What was going on in 1776 around here?
Everybody who's here now was here then. Arizona has been an indigenous homeland since time immemorial, we would say, since before recorded memory. And so we had Apache peoples, we had Yavapai peoples, Havasupais, Wallapais, Hopis, Thanathams, Akimelatams, Pipash. All of these tribal nations who are here now were here at that time. And the vast majority of Arizona was indigenous territory. The Spanish line of settlement did not go farther north than Tucson. It ended at Tucson. And so you think about it that way, only the extreme south of Arizona was in outside hands, and only nominally so even there.
You know, we think about democracy a lot with America 250. The relationship between indigenous people and democracy, consensus democracy, representation, these sorts of things. What was happening then? And post-colonial, did it change? Did it talk to us about that?
Yeah. Democracy, I think, has been a term that's sort of been monopolized. We think of it in terms of voting and elections and that kind of thing. Indigenous communities historically have been very democratic. Governing is done through consensus. Town councils of community elders and stakeholders within indigenous communities get together and discuss issues and only take a decision when consensus is reached. I mean, that's very democratic in principle. Those communities that were controlled by Spanish authorities, mission communities primarily, located by Spanish missions, they had systems of government that were instituted there by Spaniards, and they said, you need to have a town council with elected officers, with what's called like a gobernador, a governor, and town council members within that community. And so they had what we might call elections, or a form of election, although the Spaniards allowed a pretty high degree of adaptation by those indigenous communities. So often community leaders would just choose the officers. They weren't elections in the sense of casting a ballot or raising your hand. So there are different forms of democracy even in the late 18th century Arizona that we think of.
The concept of citizenship, what was that like in 1776? Was it a complex kind of thing, or was it kind of basic? You figured out you were here, you were there, we're not together. How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, community membership and what we might call citizenship within an indigenous community, you were a citizen, or you were a member of that community by virtue of your relations, who your parents were. You were a member of a clan typically, and a family, and then a larger community group. But when Spain comes in, they have different views of citizenship and who belongs. And sometimes that had to do with military service. People who served in the Spanish military were considered citizens of Spain. But then there was also the subject relationship. So the king back in Spain, back in Madrid, had his subjects in the Americas. And indigenous people found their way into that relationship in different ways. Ultimately, Spain declares indigenous peoples citizens of Spain.
Yes.
And then Mexico continues that tradition. But there are different layers. And also to be a citizen in a place like Arizona, which is the far-flung northern frontier of the Spanish Dominion, it doesn't mean the same thing as being a citizen in a place like Mexico City or Madrid or Barcelona.
Last question here, but I could talk to you all day about this. It's really fascinating stuff. For those celebrating 250 years of the United States, what do you want them to remember, especially those of us who are out here?
Arizona was a place of turmoil during the second half of the 18th century, and 1776 doesn't really mean as much in Arizona as it would in the United States to the east. But things are happening. The Presidio of Tucson is established right 1775. But there are indigenous revolts against Spanish authority. 1751, there's the Jesuit expulsion, where Spain decides the Jesuit order is not loyal and expels them. And then the mission at Yuma is destroyed by indigenous people in 1781. And so there's a lot going on, a lot of turmoil.
This is just fascinating. Maurice Crandall, again, American Council of Learned Societies, teaches here at ASU. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You bet.
I'm Miles O'Brien, and I'm searching for solutions.
Can we adapt?
Yes, there is no choice.
Let's meet the bold thinkers with a resolve to solve.
Coming in August to Arizona PBS.
In the 1770s, when the American Revolution rumbled thousands of miles away, the Gila River flowed wide and strong through what we now call Arizona. For the Alcomadaltam, the river people, the Gila was life. Generations of Alcomadaltam farmers built an intricate network of irrigation canals, including their ancestors, the Hohokam. They harvested from fertile riverbanks and fished in its waters. The river wasn't just a source of food. It was central to ceremony, trade, and identity. But over the next century, change came swiftly. As settlers arrived in the 1800s, upstream dams and diversions began to slow the flow. Much of the Gila's water was claimed before it could reach the Alcomadaltam's fields. The once thriving agricultural system of the river people suffered devastating losses. Through the 20th century, the Gila River was reshaped by reservoirs, canals, and legal battles over water rights. Today, the Gila still flows, but differently. Decades of advocacy has restored some water to the Alcomadaltam, allowing them to revive traditional crops and cultural practices. The river remains a reminder of resilience, adaptation, and the deep ties between water and people in the desert. From a lifeline in the 1770s to a contested resource in modern Arizona, the Gila River story is more than geography. It's a testament to survival. And for the river people, its flow carries the past, nourishes the present, and shapes the future.
A mobile exhibition recently crossed the state in celebration of America's 250th anniversary. The Road to 250 Traveling Museum was designed to help generate enthusiasm and civic pride by bringing history and civic reflection to communities across Arizona. We spoke with museum docent Steve Wickert and Laura Tarek, the executive director of the Arizona America 250 Commission. Laura, I'm going to start with you. The America 250 Commission, what is that?
It's a governor-appointed commission housed out of the Secretary of State's office, and we have the honor of coordinating and planning statewide public programming in honor of the semi-quincentennial, our 250th.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Steve. And now the Road to 250 Traveling Museum. You get to define that.
I do. So we put together basically a mobile tour, which the centerpiece was the Arizona Liberty Bell that you see sitting out at the Capitol right now, in a new estate right now. And so, yeah, literally got to travel with that bell across the whole state.
How big was it? A big truck? Was it what kind of vehicle?
It was a tractor trailer.
Yeah.
It wasn't really.
And it actually.
There we go. Now we're seeing. Yeah. Yes.
It actually expanded too. So there we go.
Yeah. You traveled all over. All right, Laura. Did this thing ever break down? It did not break. Look at that.
It didn't break down, but I will tell a funny story that when we hit 100 in March, we gave those air compressors, the AC units, a run for their money.
I'll bet. And there's the Liberty Bell again. And this was from February through April, correct? Mm-hmm. All right, Laura. How do you decide what to put in there with national history, state history, the whole nine?
Well, how do you condense Arizona and American history?
Yes.
You know, it's a unique challenge. We worked with the Arizona Historical Society, the Arizona Memory Project, museum professionals, other stakeholders, to really put something forward that would be inviting and reflective and invite pride in Arizona. And we were just so thrilled with the response.
And Steve, panels, videos, did you have interactive stuff in there as well?
We did. We had, one side was dedicated to the national kind of story, and the other side was the Arizona story. On one side, we had an area where people can write about moments that made them as Arizonans or Americans, and we got the best responses from people across the state.
Talk more about those responses. What'd you hear?
We heard just a lot of pride in our country, a pride in being Arizonan, really loving our climate. That was another one. Just pride in being an American, and which was so refreshing to me.
And again, Laura, this is like making the milestone accessible, like hands-on, one-on-one to everyone in the state. That's the goal here?
That was really important to Secretary Fontes as chair of our commission, that this is something that, you don't just come to the state capitol to see, this is something that comes to you. No matter where you are in the state, there's something to celebrate, there's a way to get involved, and we were so proud to be able to take this on the road.
There was like history and storytelling as well? Mm-hmm. How did that work?
Well, I think, one of the things, it was Steve mentioned, the moments that made us, we also had our Dear America, Love Arizona postcards on board where people could share a reflection of what they love about our state, their thoughts on the semi-quincentennial, and we have those displayed at the state capitol, at state parks, just all over the place, and we've archived some permanently in the Arizona Memory Project, and those stories are so meaningful, people talking about long histories of military service and what brought them out to Arizona, or family legacies here, or what they hope for the future, and those are magical cards to read.
When you traveled throughout the state and you hit a certain county, did you go to a particular place? Did you have something focused and targeted?
It all depended. We were at libraries a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We were at convention type places. It just all depended on the community.
Downtown Tombstone, that was a fun one.
That was incredible. Tombstone, yeah.
That thing in downtown Tombstone, I mean, holy smokes.
It was very dirty after.
Yeah,
but
when it will stick with you on this one. When it first started, what did you expect, and did what you expect occur?
Yeah, I expected it to be popular just because of what was in it. It was. I was fortunate enough to be part of the team that put stuff inside of it. And so I think that was really kind of a call to people to come out. And every county was different. Every city had their own culture and their own ways of doing things. And coming back from it, I feel so much more American. I guess that's the way to say it. It was a great experience.
What about your expectations, Laura?
Well, I really hoped that people would get excited about it and see themselves in it, that was one of our most important goals, is that this is something that all Arizonans can see themselves in and want to be a part of. And those were some of the really special moments in the trailer, when someone would come in and have a personal story. Like on the military panel, we talked about USS Arizona, and so someone coming in and saying, my grandfather served, or I have a family connection to that. Those moments were so connective and so powerful. So I would say, honestly, it exceeded my expectations. I mean, we just had such positive feedback, and especially bringing it to communities across Arizona. We heard the most wonderful things from our host sites of, we never get things like this, or thank you so much for bringing it here. That was so special.
That's great. That's great. Hey, last question here, Steve, for you. With the mobile museum now, will it ever be mobile again?
That's a great question. That's probably more for Laura.
Parts of it will. Yes. Parts of it will. We're working on sending those panels around to the entire statewide library system so that it can live on.
All right, you guys, congratulations. It sounded like you had a great time and a lot of good was done.
Amazing time.
Good to have you both here. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of Arizona Horizon. You have a great evening.